Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, creator of Out of Frame and creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education. And with me today is Paul Nelson, our social media producer and editor of Out of Frame Shorts. You may have noticed we are not joined today by Jennifer Montessanti.
We miss you, Jen.
We miss Jen. Jen is off. We announced this last week or last podcast. Mm-hmm. Jen is actually in Utah right now, so we're.
She's doing better than us.
She's doing better than us at the moment. So she is. She's out there, and we're just going to forge on ahead, just the two of us, for this episode, and I think just a couple episodes we're going to be doing this. But still can kind of figure out what we're doing without Jen. But in any case, we're here.
Yes.
And we've got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about, we kind of wanted to do horror for, as we get closer to Halloween. So we decided we would talk one of the most classic horror films, I think, ever made, really.
Yes.
Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. So we're going to get into that in a little bit. And then, of course, as always, if you are a patron of the show and you support us on patreon.com/outoframeshow, we've got a bonus episode coming up where we're going to be talking about Alien as well. But before we get to that, how are you doing, Paul?
I'm doing well. I think I'm holding off depression. The news just keeps getting worse and worse for movie theaters.
Yeah.
Regal is now shut down through the end of the year.
At least.
And AMC has announced that they won't have cash on hand. 2021, possibly. So
yeah,
I'm concerned about entertainment moving forward in general.
Me too. I think Regal. I don't know if this was just in the U.S. or in the U.S. and the U.K., but 25,000 employees laid off, and then what is it? Cinemark overall is like 47,000, something like that worldwide. I mean, it is. I may be wrong about the numbers, the specific numbers, but it's a tremendous amount of people who are being laid off right now, already laid off.
And at this point, it's because there's no new content.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the crazy thing is like I really think that a lot of people could, maybe would be interested in going out to the theater, but what's there to watch? We
Hocus Pocus.
Right. We went to see Tenet, obviously, and I was very excited about going to see Tenet. But even I love going to the movies, and I'm not really going that much because what am I going for?
Right.
You're right. Hocus Pocus.
Empire Strikes Back.
Which
almost got me the other day.
Which is cool, but that's great. Although I gotta say, I haven't done that yet. And I would, except for I don't understand why they didn't put all three of them in the theater or do them in order. So why not start with A New Hope and then do Empire?
Disney's probably strong-arming him.
I'm sure, but that's the weirdest choice because I don't want to come into the middle.
Right.
I want to watch the trilogy. I want to watch that trilogy, and I'd be happy to watch that in the theater. But it's weird to start with Empire. So, but here we are.
The original cut. If they did that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, you can't even buy that on DVD anymore. So, I don't know. But I agree, man. I'm real concerned. I think I was on another podcast fairly recently talking about the sort of the shift to VOD and all those kinds of things, and the argument that was being made there was that this can be a boon for creators, right? Because you may have more opportunities to do more niche content, and that's probably true to some extent, except for I like big budget movies. I like movies that are kind of huge tentpole extravaganza, like set pieces and like the whole thing, and I worry that we're not going to get any of those because without the theater distribution model, like Mulan did, and maybe there's a lot of reasons why Mulan didn't do well, but it's not like Mulan got, we'll never know, right?
We'll never
exactly.
know.
But I think it's a safe bet that Mulan did not make what it would have made had it launched.
We have theaters. Historical, of their last live action remix for Disney, and they do very well.
Yeah. And again, Tenet, I think, is another good example where, Tenet released in theaters, but obviously it released to a much lower gross than it would have otherwise. The only way we're going to get back to where we were is if these companies are willing to put stuff out and get people more comfortable bit by bit, you know?
And the studios, while it makes sense to delay your James Bond, I get it. You don't want to, you put a lot of money into this, you want to try to recoup as much as you can. But if you're waiting till next October for Dune, there might not be a movie theater for it to play in.
Right.
And by delaying this, you are obviously making the short-term beneficial decision.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do think that's debatable though, because, you know, again, like if you release something on VOD and make 10% of what you would have made in the theater, especially on a movie, on certain some of these movies too, I think maybe are really good examples of not really a great strategy because you've already invested in the marketing campaigns for these things.
Yes.
So if you think about
That's a good point.
like Wonder Woman or Black Widow or, you know, even Dune to some extent, you know, you were kind of making promises to people at the beginning of the year. You already spent millions and millions of dollars. I mean, certainly Black Widow was a good example of that. We were already getting Black Widow trailers out on television, on YouTube. I mean, all of that is paid ads, you know. So they spent tens of millions of dollars in January, you know, for starting to roll up to the launch of Black Widow. They had to delay that. And okay, fine, that was early in the year. I get it. But to keep delaying it and keep rescheduling it, then delaying it again, like every time they do that, those announcements cost a ton of money. So I don't know. I think it's actually debatable that the short-term benefit for some of these may not even make sense. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's, you know, the long-term problems are
the entertainment
severe.
industry is going to be radically different.
Yeah.
And I fear not for the better.
I do too.
It's going to be, are we going to get the same quality content? Doubtful?
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you feel about some of the sort of bigger budget movies that have come out on Netflix? You know, I mean, I don't know, stuff like Extraction or whatever. Or what was Michael Bay's movie? Six. I don't remember.
I don't either.
It was. I can look it
up. But
it was terrible.
I think the issue with that is we don't know how these movies perform, and also how much information does Netflix give the creators to know?
Yeah.
If it's successful or not.
Yeah, I do think that's a big deal too. I mean, so, you know, obviously, you know, this is a product of the Foundation for Economic Education. Weirdly, we don't, like we talk about economics and political philosophy and stuff a lot on Out of Frame, but we don't actually get into it a lot on this show. And I don't mind that. I think it's fine to actually just talk about, you know, the films that we talk about and everything. But price signals are a thing, right? And they're really, really important. So I think most people don't really understand what prices are and what monetary prices especially do for you. I mean, I think people think that prices are sort of arbitrarily determined by, you know, the store or the producer of the content or whatever. But that's not true. Prices are negotiated, you know, sort of set of bids and preferences between buyer and seller, right? So what that tells us is that as prices, especially for things that are released frequently, like a movie, you know, are sort of bid and negotiated all the time, we get to sort of a general sense of like, this is what this is worth, this is what that is worth, whatever. So that helps us a lot because it tells us that if something is, you know, cost a really high price, it suggests that it's a high demand, low supply kind of thing. And then maybe that gives producers an incentive or at least the information to say, oh, hey, maybe I should jump into that space. So, you know, people talk about diamonds. You know, there's always the diamond water paradox, whatever. Water's all over the place. It's very, very cheap because we can get it very, very easily. Diamonds, for whatever reason, have become, you know, a status symbol and all of these other things. And therefore, but they're also rare. And so the price is high. So that actually encourages people to, you know, to sell, make, and distribute and sell diamonds. That's kind of the core of it. But with movies, you know, we've sort of settled around $10, you know, whatever, as the price of a movie ticket. But that doesn't mean every single movie is worth $10 to everybody.
Right.
What we learn from profits is, did this movie was it actually worth enough to enough people to make it worth the cost of production, And some movies aren't. A lot of movies aren't, right? Most movies, frankly, aren't. But that's how we tell whether or not we're making something that people like or don't like. How do we get that in a world where Netflix won't release that information?
You don't. You might be able to rely on Twitter, but even then, you can't trust that.
No, you really can't. I mean, Twitter is the loudest voice, not necessarily the majority voice.
Rotten Tomatoes, which is also not helpful.
Yeah, Rotten Tomatoes is honestly, it's just kind of strange because the way that Rotten Tomatoes is set up in a way that everybody seems to be confused by. Like everybody assumes that like an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes is like the movie is 80% good, when it's really like 80% of critics just rated it above some arbitrary like good or bad line. Well, it's not even the critics too, because critics don't even say fresh or not fresh, right? It's the Rotten Tomatoes people who say that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you can't really tell from any of that.
I think,
and also whatever, critics can review whatever they want.
Right.
And a lot of times that doesn't mean that anybody wants to go see it.
That happens quite a bit.
Sure does.
I think a very good example of markets and price signals and showing things that could work is going back to the 70s with the blockbuster.
Yeah.
You look at Star Wars and the movie we're going to talk about later, Alien. It showed directors and producers like James Cameron that these sci-fi movies could work. Yeah. And without those movies, probably don't get Terminator.
Oh yeah, of course not.
And,
right?
And you can kind of go all on down the list. And
yeah, so it is a perfect example because like Star Wars was a production that nobody thought was going to work. So much so that this is famously, right, George Lucas was able to negotiate licensing rights for toys and for ancillary products and stuff like that. The studios didn't care because the studios did not believe in the product. They did not believe that it was something that was actually going to be popular. Price signals are how we found out that, in fact, it was popular. It crushed it, right? And those signals subsequently not only encouraged the studios to invest more money in sequels and now in a giant, 11 movie whatever universe that we have and growing with shows and by the way, the Mandalorian's coming back.
Can't wait.
Immediately after this. And so we got, those signals encourage people to do that. They also encouraged other film studios to make more sci-fi. And again, we got Aliens 1979, I absolutely think that Alien would not have been certainly would have been greenlit or financed to the level that it was in 1979 if 1977 hadn't proven that big sci-fi space movies could be a thing, So that's great, except for when you have a black box of Hulu, Netflix, whatever, and they won't tell you what the box office numbers are. It's it's hard even for the producers to know, let alone for anybody outside that world to tell. I don't know. That's weird, and it's gonna, I think, reshape a lot of things.
That's probably my biggest concern is we're going to end up having worse content because of this than we would normally. Yeah.
I am intrigued by the idea of people doing more smaller scale content, but we're already getting that with TV, right?
Plenty of that.
And good stuff, really. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It also puts, companies like Netflix and Hulu in a little bit more of a driving role. The Hollywood's it's gone through weird periods, right? So not weird periods, but it's just gone through different eras, essentially, where in the 20s it was very sort of kind of Wild Westy. I mean, it was like just kind of nuts. Like between the late teens and let's say the early 30s, you had kind of vaudevillians going out to, just buy cameras and just start making crazy stuff. Like, Georges Méliès kind of, early Lumiere pictures, stuff like that. That's cool, but it was experimental in a lot of ways, and it was sort of a novelty, right? Then we got the studio system starts to emerge in the 30s, and they had all this power to greenlight stuff and control actors and everything else. By the 60s, though, that started to shift again. It became a little bit more independent. It became more entrepreneurial again. And then, honestly, to some extent with the blockbuster thing and with long-running franchises, you kind of went back to the studio model a little bit. But I think Netflix is actually the most old movie studio model of anything right now, because they sign actors and directors and producers and stuff to like multi-film, long-term deals, and not like we're signing you to play this character in a lot of Marvel movies, but like Adam Sandler is signed to like 5 movies.
Have you seen Hubie Halloween yet?
I have not. No. Did you?
I'm going to watch it. I'm very excited.
I have no idea what it even is.
It's Adam Sandler.
Okay.
With his cast of characters that he brings back from his...
Literally every other Adam Sandler movie.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, fine. Whatever. No, I haven't seen it. I also think it's weird. I mean, I say this, and there's movies like Halloween, but I think it's weird to do a Halloween movie where you literally put Halloween in the title. But whatever, he's going for it.
Yeah.
Why not? But that's my point though. Like Adam Sandler is signed to make, however many of his next movies with Netflix. Like that's just, what it's going to be. And it's a lot more controlled than even, some of the previous studio deals that we've seen. So it's kind of going back to that world, which is, and then simultaneously when the studio also controls all of the information about whether or not it's a movie successful, you're really putting a lot of eggs in one basket, which is a little disconcerting.
Not great.
No.
Because we always, throughout history, less competition doesn't really work out.
Yeah, and look, I'm not terribly worried about this long term because, entrepreneurs will break through that, as soon as it becomes really necessary for them to. I'm just generally not worried about it in the grand scheme of things, but I definitely think we're going to go through a period that's going to be a little strange. And the longer this goes on, I mean, I did an episode of Out of Frame, in May maybe, or April. I'm trying to remember which one. I think the April one was going to be the Winter Soldier episode, and I covered it a little bit. And then the May episode was did we just break the world one, where I talked about Hollywood and all of the fallout from this. And frankly, a lot of the stuff that I talked about in that episode is coming true right now. Like you're seeing the collapse of, like when you shut down the movie theaters, you're seeing the collapse of a lot of supporting businesses, So it's not just that 25,000 people get laid off from the theater. All of the concessions orders that they would have placed over the last 6 months are dried up and gone too, right? Which means that all that pressure on the companies that do distribution and shipping and, production of, like popcorn and everything else, like they're taking a hit. And then down the line, eventually it's the studios themselves, right? And I said all of that. We made a cool, I liked it anyway, cool graphic to show that web of connection. And now we're seeing it.
Yeah.
It's happening. So I don't know, man. I'm definitely concerned.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting time.
Yeah. I do, though. One of the things that I've thought a little bit about this time is I do think it's still an entrepreneurial opportunity for certain kinds of filmmakers. Our producer, Pavel, will remember me mentioning like the idea of doing a low-budget horror movie built around isolation and like shooting it in a way where you could have like one actor or a very small cast of actors in isolated sets, something that would be like a socially distanced production, but which would be horrifying because it was like actually thematically about isolation. I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to take what's going on right now and turn it into new art. So I'm looking forward to seeing that too on the other side. But speaking of horror movies built around isolation, let's talk about The Shining.
Yes.
So, in a utterly shocking turn of events, this is Paul's first time seeing The Shining.
So, caveat, I'm not a huge horror fan at all.
I'm not either, to be fair, by the way. Just getting that out of the way.
So, you can't get away. You know the beats of The Shining without ever having to watch it because if you're within the culture, you know what happens.
Well, and when were you born?
89.
89. So this movie came out in 80.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you were 9, or by the time you were born, actually, like this movie had almost a 9-year run. Right. And it was at that point already well solidified as like one of the
one of the best horror movies of
all time. Yeah.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm not a horror fan.
Yeah.
But this was less slasher.
Yeah, no, it's not a slasher movie.
It's more cerebral.
And that's true of a lot of the horror movies from the 70s and 80s,
mm-hmm.
right? Like I think we didn't really get slasher kind of stuff. I mean, you did in the later 80s, right? Once you start getting into, again, Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and what am I thinking of? Hellraiser and stuff like that. Yeah, you start to get into it. And then now you've got Wes Craven's entire run of everything and, Huey Bowl and you got a lot of stuff now.
Right.
But yeah, back then, like I think about the horror movies from the 70s and early 80s and I think about like The Omen or, even this is later 80s, I think, but like The Thing, which is not really a slasher movie, we're just putting out an episode on They Live, it's John Carpenter's They Live, which again is not a slasher movie at all. It's just a kind of a weird zombie movie. And mm-hmm. on the subject of zombie movies, Dawn of the Dead, right? Not a lot of blood or gore,
right,
in those movies, and certainly not a lot of jump scares like we
are used to now.
Super used to now. But The Shining is just intellectually terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Stanley Kubrick movie. I don't know how much I have to say about The Shining, like as far as the plot is concerned, because I feel like everybody already knows this. But Stanley Kubrick movie from 1980, starring Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd, who was a little child actor at the time. We'll probably get back to a lot about him later on, but it's a movie about isolation. It's a movie about a man who is a writer, or an aspiring writer, I should say. Maybe not really a writer, but he's an aspiring writer who has an opportunity to take a job as a caretaker for the Overlook Hotel, which is set in the movie. It's in Colorado. It's actually in Oregon. It's actually on Mount Hood, is where they shot the exteriors, which I've been to a bunch. But he's gonna take care of the hotel over the winter when they don't have guests. The job is simple, right? The job, and he gets explained by the owner of the hotel. It's really a pretty straightforward job. Run the boiler in different parts of the hotel. Just keep the hotel heated. Make sure that it doesn't fall into disrepair. If there's a crack in the roof, go fix it. Whatever. Basic stuff. But they just have to keep somebody there over the winter. So to Jack, this seems great. This is a good opportunity to just settle down and get his book written. Mm-hmm. He takes his wife and young son, and they're going to spend 5 months in this hotel. That's the plot. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's all that's going to happen. But he slowly goes very insane.
Very insane.
Yeah. So, yeah. It's simple.
Yeah.
And honestly, some of the best horror movies really are that simple. Like it doesn't have to be Jaws. Jaws is a very, very simple movie. Mm-hmm. There's a terrifying shark.
There's a big shark.
It's a big shark.
Don't go in the water.
Don't go in the water. Don't even get in a boat, honestly. He'll destroy your boat.
Yep.
It's a big shark. Easy.
That's scary.
Alien, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Pretty simple.
It's just Jaws. There's a big alien. Don't let him on your ship. That's it. That's basically the plot. But I mean, Kubrick is widely recognized as, so one of the greatest directors of all time. And I am not actually a big fan of Kubrick, but I do like The Shining a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a couple of his movies that I really like. The Shining is one, Full Metal Jacket. I don't even really like 2001, to be honest. It's okay. But The Shining, the moments in The Shining for me that like from a directorial standpoint, there are some that just stand out, and they're just some of the most iconic things that have ever been put to film.
Yes.
And those are the reasons why.
That we still have memes in 2020.
Yeah.
40 years later.
So I'm curious, like, as somebody who saw it for the first time, like, what surprised you? Like, what were... by the way, we're going to immediately get into spoilers. There's, again, it's a very, very simple plot.
Yeah.
Horrible things happen. Creepy things.
Other than the mother smoking with her child. I'm kidding.
Does a lot of that.
What I really enjoyed about...
just the general spousal abuse.
That too.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
Times have changed.
For the better.
For the better.
Much better. Just and child abuse.
Child abuse, yeah.
Jeez.
She's so nonchalant about that too. Sorry. All right, so we'll take this moment to talk. There's a moment where she's talking to a child psychologist about Danny. This is in flashback. And was it in flashback? No, it's happening. It's just happening. Right before they left. And she's talking because Danny's having some weird nightmare kind of situation. And child psychologist comes in, and Shelley Duvall just explains this story about how, he's got like a bruise on his arm or whatever, and or he broke his arm.
Dislocated his
shoulder. Yeah, that's right. And she's just so casual about, Jack, like, he was drinking, and he came home a little late, and just like you do 100 times before, he just pulled Danny's arm away. He just didn't know how much force, and you're just like, yeah, you dislocated your kid's shoulder, dude.
Yeah.
And the mom is just kind of like, oh,
it happens.
It's a thing. Yeah. Weird.
And there's no follow-up?
No follow-up.
The psychiatrist,
she just has a disapproving look and makes some notes. She's like, yes. Ooh, that's a little weird.
In 2020, that kid would be gone.
Oh, yeah. That would be cause for Child Protective Services rushing in. And
yes.
That may be its own problem for other reasons, but it's, just weird how, like, casually some of those things are.
Yeah, just culture has changed, time has changed.
Yeah.
But what I liked most about this movie is the pacing.
Yeah.
It started out pretty slow, but it was a slow burn. It ratcheted up the tension.
Yeah.
And when it just peaked at the end of the movie, you really felt it.
Yeah. It's funny because we've talked a lot about Christopher Nolan movies because you're obviously a huge Nolan fan. And I don't really make this connection a lot, but like I think Kubrick uses pacing in a lot of similar ways to Nolan, where Nolan will take a good long while to lay groundwork and to build something into, a really intense third act. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that in a lot of ways because, even speaking as a filmmaker, you need to build. A third act doesn't work if you haven't set it up properly, And The Shining is a very good example overall. There's one thing I actually talked about with my wife that it was not unused. It was not something that was set up and then failed to be used, but it was just kind of a weak thing. But I'll get to that when we get more to the end. But I agree. The pacing is pretty slow at the beginning. But you're learning about the hotel. You're learning about them. You're also experiencing isolation with them, yes. Right? You're experiencing the growing sense of loneliness. And the way that the movie is structured is they arrive at the hotel on closing day. Mm-hmm. So the first moments they're in the hotel, there's a ton of people around. And there's a frenzy of activity. And then the next day,
dead.
Nothing.
Right.
Right? And that's really important too, because Kubrick really set up like bustling activity to jarring nothingness. And so that immediately sets you off on this path of like, okay, all right. And it starts nice, right? Shelley Duvall's character, brings him breakfast in bed, and it's like he's sleeping till 11, and it's like, well, this is the nice little vacation that we can do or whatever. And she's like, we can go for a walk today, and it's nice out, and things go very wrong.
Off the rails. What I really appreciated as well is that they took the time to show the hotel. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the movie, you felt like you kind of knew where you were in relation to everything else inside the hotel.
Man, I think that's really important. I think it's especially important for horror movies. Because horror movies, a lot of times, modern ones, I feel like have a tendency to not really establish geography very well. Mm-hmm. So it's like they'll pull these sort of jump scare kinds of things, but you as an audience member have no context. You don't know what's up is down or what's around this corner or that corner. You don't know where your character is heading, And then also, because a lot of times now it's just dark hallways, you have multiple characters in multiple dark hallways that are all disconnected from any broader geography. Right. I actually think you make a really, really compelling point here, because Kubrick takes so much care to let you know, here's where the kitchen is, here's where their bedroom is, here's where the main lobby is, here's the area where Jack is writing, here is like the grand staircase, here's room 237, like here's all of these places, and we see them literally walk, or Danny ride his tricycle around. You see them go from place to place to place. So when Jack is now at the end of the movie chasing people with an axe, and when Danny and Shelley Duvall, her name's Wendy, when Wendy is running away from Jack, you know where she's going. Mm-hmm. You know where their bathroom is in relationship to their apartment, even, right? Like you see all of the structure of all of that. So if she can get to the bedroom, she can get to the bathroom. Or if Danny can get to the kitchen, he can get outside, or he can get to this other place. I think that's super important for this movie.
And it's really spawned a life of the hotel, a life of its own. Like after the movie, people just want to go back to the Overlook Hotel, I
guess.
And I mean, they've had a sequel,
Dr. Sleep, which I haven't seen.
I haven't either,
actually. And then there was the horrifying, not horrifying in a good way, but the bad remake that Stephen King did himself. So this is another thing. So The Shining is based on a book written by Stephen King. I'm also not a big Stephen King fan. So this movie really shouldn't work for me in a lot of ways, because I don't love Kubrick and I kind of hate Stephen King. But because honestly, this is a whole other tangent, but like Stephen King for me a lot of times feels like he cops out as a writer. He will pull supernatural stuff out of nowhere to be the villain character, but it's never explained and it's never really well set up. So like even in The Shining, the supernatural aspect of the story is literally The Shining, right? And it's like a telepathic ability that Danny has. This is what we find out, like his nightmares or whatever, actually some kind of premonition,
Now, is he communicating with the hotel?
Yeah, that's really unclear too, because maybe it's the ghost of the hotel. I don't know. The hotel itself is a creepy, ghostly entity, and it's not really sure what that is.
At the beginning of the movie, the hotel owner, it's we built on top of an Indian burial ground. It's fine.
Right, it's fine.
No big deal.
We chose it for its views, obviously. So, for its isolation and its views. No, so Danny has this ability, but also the chef, who he meets at the beginning of the movie on closing day, this guy named Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers, which is a great
all-time name.
Also has The Shining. And so, the Deus Ex, but this is my complaint about Stephen King a little bit as a writer, is that, Wendy and Danny are essentially saved by Deus Ex Machina, right? I mean, like the only reason, by magical Deus Ex Machina, because the only reason that they get out of there is with their lives is because they have this telepathic connection, and Halloran brings a snowcat up the mountain because he sees something in Danny, and freaks out, and he goes up and checks on him. But which is like, it's okay, but like it's a magical solution to a problem. Like Wendy didn't really solve the problem. She didn't, of her own power, figure out how to get down from the mountain. She didn't figure out how to stop Jack in any kind of meaningful way. You know, I don't know. It's stuff like that. I just feel like it's a little bit of like a letdown, but it's not Kubrick. I mean, it's in the original, you know, and I don't know what else. I haven't read the book. I don't know what else. Cause Stephen King sort of famously hated The Shining. He hated
it was
Kubrick's
pretty
version of The
different.
Shining.
If I understand correctly, it's pretty different from the book.
Yeah. I don't really know what all changed. But I also know that Stephen King has hated pretty much every non-Stephen King adaptation of his books. But I've also seen some of Stephen King's made-for-TV movies, and they are garbage. So, you know, I don't know if I trust Stephen King's judgment on what's a good movie version of, you know.
Yeah.
Like Kubrick did a good job of making a horror movie that was built around the concepts.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe in the book The Shining, the hotel had more individual personality. I'm not really sure.
I don't know.
But the hotel has a lot of ghosts.
A lot of ghosts.
Or maybe
just one.
Maybe just one.
But
just
a lot
the guy.
A lot of images.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly, but I mean there are a lot of very famous aspects of The Shining that you'll have seen, you know, in memes if nothing else, right? The twin girls in the hallway that just sort of appear out of nowhere, you know, it's terrifying. Blood gushing out of an elevator, you know,
the furry.
Yeah, that
What?
was very, very strange. Don't know. It was a weird hotel. It's a weirder time back in the 40s or whatever. Who knows? But yeah, so there's that. But then also, you know, the naked woman in room 237. And it's all sort of centered around the idea that there was previously a caretaker that had murdered his family. I actually quoted this. This is the only thing I pulled out as a quote because it really set up the entire theme of the movie. Is Stuart Ullman, who's the head owner of the hotel or general manager of the hotel, says, physically it's not a demanding. He's talking to Jack when Jack's in his job interview. So physically it's not a very demanding job. The only thing that can get a bit trying up here during the winter is the tremendous sense of isolation. And Jack goes, well, that just happens to be exactly what I'm looking for. I'm outlining a new writing project, and 5 months of peace is just what I want. And Stuart goes, that's very good, Jack, because for some people, solitude and isolation can, of itself, become a problem. And Jack goes, not for me. Well, for you. Definitely
Yes.
for you. I don't know, but this gets me to, I think that maybe the thing that is sort of actually connected to the modern world a little bit, which is like isolation is a problem, you know? I mean, maybe you won't become an axe murderer, but
it's not healthy.
It's not healthy. And it's not healthy for Jack. It's not healthy for his family. I thought about this too a little bit, like just the fact that you as a family took your, I don't know, whatever, 6-year-old son to be isolated, not have any interaction with friends. And again, this is 1980. This is no internet. This is no,
Right.
barely any telephone. Who would he call anyway?
Right.
Who knows? Would have been long distance if he wanted to call somebody. It's just kind of torturous
Yes.
to a young child. Like, just feel like that is not good.
No.
It was always a bad idea.
A lot of bad parenting decisions.
Oh yeah, this movie is filled with bad parenting. The thing I was going to say that because almost everything in The Shining is really well established. For example, they are very careful to let you know where the freezer and where the storeroom are in the kitchen. Like, they're literally shown all of this stuff. So when at the end of the movie Jack is chasing Wendy, Wendy hits him with a baseball bat, knocks him unconscious, and then drags him into the storeroom, right? So we know, as an audience, we know there is a storeroom. This is a place that she could go lock somebody if she had to. So very clearly, easy thing to show. Likewise, the fact that she had a baseball bat even is something that was set up because Jack was throwing a baseball around in the lobby or whatever. We have a lot of a really good sense of like what exists, what's available. But so there's an idea. It comes from Antonin Chekhov's playwright, but called Chekhov's gun, which I don't know if you're familiar with that very much. But the idea of Chekhov's gun is that like if you show a gun being loaded in Act 1, that gun must go off in Act 3, right? Otherwise, you're promising something to your audience that you're not delivering. And the only thing I felt that way about The Shining is the knife that Danny has. Shelley Duvall. So Danny has this knife. I don't know where he got it. Whatever, it's the red rum whole situation. Danny has this knife. Wendy is asleep. Again, bad parenting.
So she locked him in. If this is the same knife I'm thinking of, she locked him in the storage room, and then while she was backing out, she picked up a knife.
No, I know. Yes. So Danny got it from her in the room. That's not my point, though. My point is that the knife is established a lot. So Danny has this knife. She takes it back from him. She's holding the knife, and then honestly, she never really does anything with it. The closest thing that happens is when Jack is like smashing his way through the door. This is the, here's Johnny moment. She just kind of mildly cuts his hand. But then she hangs on to the knife and goes outside with it and eventually just throws it away.
Yeah, just throws it on the ground.
For no reason. I don't know. It's like one of the weirder things to me about the movie because it is so well established. She got the knife. Danny had the knife, which is sort of like a fake, right? Because you're like, oh, shoot, Danny might kill her or do something terrible with the knife. He doesn't. She gets the knife back. She hangs on to it for a long time and then just discards it.
The discarding was weird. I think, though, she did nick him.
Yeah, I don't count that as like enough.
It obviously
didn't stop him.
Well, it stopped him long enough for him to hear Halloran come up in the snowcat and then redirect him to go.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
it's pretty minor though.
I think
from my and I did say this to my wife. If like cutting his hand just a little bit was the use of the knife, then she should have discarded the knife then. Right? Then the knife shouldn't have continued on in the story. This is a very weird, like very niche sort of screenwriting complaint that I've got. But that knife should have done something.
Something more?
Something more.
Yeah.
Yeah. She should have, stabbed him in the leg or I don't know, whatever. But it's weird to have her continue to carry this very important object and then
just throw it
away.
Would that complaint have been moot for you if she like put it in the snowcat?
Maybe.
And not just throw it in the
Maybe,
snow?
but even then, I think it's still, like, if I'm thinking from this sort of Chekhov's gun standpoint, it just doesn't feel like it did enough.
Yeah.
And I think that especially in a situation where, like, again, another thing that was set up is that there's a big hedge maze, and actually one of the coolest, sort of Stanley Kubrick shots is the model of the hedge maze. And then the camera is overhead on the model and then zooming down into the model that's like just in the lobby of the hotel. And then you're in the maze with her and Danny. That is amazing. There are shots like that in this movie that are just filmmaking gold. But so the movie established that there's a hedge maze. They also established that Danny could get his way through the maze. And they established that Jack never went in there. And he didn't know what to do. So, like, really the final aspect of the movie is, sort of Jack chasing Danny into the maze, getting trapped, Danny coming out. So I was saying, like, the knife could have been used in that context, too, of, like, maybe, he's injured because she stabs him or does something.
Right.
Whatever. I don't know. It's just weird. Like, there are so many things about this movie that are so well set up and so well established. It's just one that's jarring for me that's not. But, I don't know, man. It's overall just a masterpiece.
Really good. It has sparked a lot of curiosity for me. I definitely want to rewatch it. But I also want to look at the documentary that these people put together called Room 237.
Yeah.
And just kind of like try to figure out the mystery behind everything. And we haven't even talked about the last scene yet.
No. So.
The twist?
Twist, I guess. So, again, magical Deus Ex Machina. Well, it's not even Deus Ex Machina, but just a magical, like supernatural aspect of this. So I guess we got to set it up a little bit. So Jack has a couple what seem like, well, he has a lot of hallucinations, but one of the recurring hallucinations is this ballroom, where he goes into a ballroom and he sits down at the bar and he banters with the bartender and has
like he's known him,
he's known him forever. It's known him his whole life, whatever. And you kind of interpret this as Jack's losing it.
Yes.
And even you can kind of interpret it as like, even if he has never met the bartender before, it's just kind of, swagger kind of nonsense that you would say to a bartender, Jimmy, you're just the best bartender I've ever had, right? You're an alcoholic. Like, these are things that are maybe, And then the twist is Jack is, again, spoilers, Jack is frozen to death out in the hedge maze. But then we cut back to the hotel and show a photo of 1940s. 1921. Oh, you're right. 1921. Ball and a big ballroom scene, just like we saw in his hallucination. And as we zoom in and keep zooming in and seeing all the faces of the people in there, there's Jack.
Front and center.
And I don't know what that means.
It just kind of like, well, what did I just watch?
It's Jack's hallucination the whole time.
Is he a reincarnation?
Is he a ghost? Is he reincarnation? I have no idea. I don't know. They just left it that way.
Which I think left me with wanting to know more.
Yeah.
And wanting to rewatch it. So
it is curious. Well, it also, there's a scene too, and again, it's in hallucination, of Jack meeting the previous caretaker. And Jack saying, well, no, I saw a picture of you. You were the caretaker of the hotel. And the old caretaker says, well, you are the caretaker.
You've always
been the caretaker. I don't know. Some weird stuff.
Yes.
But these are the Stephen King kind of moments. They're like supernatural, whatever is going on. I don't know. Like that stuff. Anyway, we should probably wrap up the Shining discussion. I will say, I'm a big fan of this movie. And I don't say that lightly because, again, I'm not a horror genre fan very much. So this is one of the standouts for me. It's something I don't rewatch a ton, but whenever I do, I think it's just beautifully done. Also, I should mention Wendy Carlos wrote the score to this movie, and it's tremendously a part of the effect of the film. The score is very 80s.
Yes.
But it's also
effective.
Really effective. I definitely recommend it. If you haven't seen The Shining, you absolutely should. Also, if you're thinking about what isolation does to people,
it's a good example.
This is a good example. But yeah. Final thoughts, Paul.
Give it a watch, even if you're not a horror fan.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah. Well, all right. That is all we've got time for today for the main episode. But as I said at the beginning, for patrons, we are going to continue and do a bonus section on Alien. If you want to become a patron and support the show and support Out of Frame and support Fee, just go to patreon.com/outoframeshow. And if not, we still love you. We're still glad that you're watching the show on YouTube or Spotify or wherever else you're listening and watching the show. Check us out. Check out Out of Frame on YouTube at youtube.com/feeonline. And check out our Instagram and Twitter accounts, which we've just got going. And for everybody else, thanks, and we'll see you next time.